Good afternoon. It is News Radio 1029 KARN. I am your host, Brad Schmidt. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. 501 403 KARN is the phone number, 501 403 5276. If you want to join the conversation, talk about any of the things we're going to talk about today. I'm actually literally just working on this before I come on the air. I mean, literally just in the last couple of minutes. There was a story that was posted by a guy named Robbie Starbuck on Twitter. Robbie is an independent journalist. I've been following him for some time on Twitter. He's got, I don't know, 500,000 followers or something like that. So he's not like a super, like mega celebrity in the independent journalist world, but he's done some great reporting on several things, including children being abused in schools and various things. But he has recently done an interview with the Secretary General of Guatemala. And the Secretary General of Guatemala is investigating child trafficking into the United States from Guatemala, Honduras, and other areas in the region, but specifically across the southern border into the United States. And interestingly enough, I've been watching this interview, and I've saved it on my Twitter page or shared it on my Twitter page. I would encourage you to watch it. It's a long video. It's almost 50 minutes long, but it's a great interview. It's well done, and it's very, very interesting. One of the things that they talk about is that the offices of an organization called Save the Children have been raided in Guatemala by the Guatemalan law enforcement community. I don't know what their equivalent of the FBI or whatever that is, but their Department of Justice, or their version of the Department of Justice in Guatemala, has raided the offices of this Save the Children organization in just the last couple of weeks. Now, and maybe even more recently than that. Now, if this name of this organization sounds familiar, what you'll find out is that this organization was at one point had on its board of directors none other than the illustrious First Lady, Jill Biden. And so apparently when they started investigating this organization, they did not realize that Jill Biden was a part of it. But last week it says the NGO named Save the Children, who of course Jill Biden used to be the chair of their board, has been raided by the Guatemalan police department. And now guess what? Much like Viktor Shokin in Ukraine a few years back, now suddenly the Biden administration is calling for the removal of both the Attorney General in Guatemala, but also the Secretary General in Guatemala to be removed. And there was warnings sent to the Secretary General not to do this interview with Robbie Starbuck. Some folks in the U.S. government said, yeah, you probably shouldn't do this interview because we don't want you doing this interview and we don't want you talking about this. So there were some warnings allegedly sent from the American government to silence this individual, much like they did with Viktor Shokin when he was investigating an organization that was connected to none other than Hunter Biden. So we now have a very, very big breaking scandal that is taking place. This interview was just released, about 24 hours ago, and last night CNN had about 600,000 primetime viewers. This video has seen more than 2 million views in the last 24 hours. In fact, let me double check the numbers here real quick. 2.2 million views this video has seen. I've not seen one single mention of this in any news organization anywhere. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, anywhere. Even so much as to say this guy's crazy and he's a complete lunatic, but hey, it's out here if you're interested in seeing the lunacy of it. So I've reached out to Robbie to see if I can get him on. He said he is not available today. Yeah, so we are going to we're going to keep looking into this and digging into it. We'll talk a little bit about that interview today, but it's a very interesting one to say the least. So we'll get into that today. One of the stories we didn't get to yesterday was the sales tax increase. We talked a little bit about that and talked about the possibility of that coming up. Another story we didn't get to yesterday because we ended up spending quite a bit of time on the stuff with China and how that relates to here in Arkansas. But Chris Jones suing Bart Hester. Chris Jones, if you remember, he ran for governor against Governor Huckabee Sanders, and is now suing an Arkansas state senator, Bart Hester, over a tweet that he didn't like, and is suggesting that this is tantamount to defamation. So we'll get into that story and get into talking about that. Then, of course, the Trump trial is still big news pretty much everywhere you go. And Stormy Daniels and her testimony on it. And Toby and I had a very interesting conversation today. And it raised a question in my mind as we got to talking about that particular case today. And it's like I said, it's raised a question about, prostitution, legalizing prostitution versus pornography and all that kind of stuff. And so I want to bring that topic up if we get a chance today. How do we go about protecting women who are, speaking of sex trafficking out of Guatemala, how do we protect as a nation, as a state, as a, local municipality, whatever, how do we protect women who are being potentially forced into sex trafficking, forced into some form of sex work that they may not want to be involved in, and other things that would relate to the discussion of legalizing potentially, whether it's prostitution or changing some of the regulations surrounding it. And so we'll talk about that because there's a bit of precedent being set in various places around the world on how to better deal with the issue of sex work, prostitution, and so on. Because one of the things that we're noticing, and one of the things that has been seen in statistics, that most often the people that are going to jail for sex trafficking are not the individuals who are I'm sorry, not sex trafficking, but prostitution. The people who are going to jail are not the perpetrators of criminal activity, but the women who are oftentimes not always, certainly, but oftentimes victims of a sex trafficking industry, if not an organized ring in one way or another, but sometimes even just local pimps and things like that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. How do we go about protecting women in that and dealing with the laws and regulations surrounding it? Because I think we need to start talking about a different approach. Because you look around the country and you see what's going on. I've watched some of the video footage from the streets of Philadelphia and the streets of Pittsburgh and many other crime-ridden cities, Seattle, Portland, Oregon, Los Angeles, Oakland. And it just genuinely seems like we could do a better job in dealing with all of that. So we're going to bring up some maybe a little bit of controversial thought processes on that, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it and see how you would maybe approach it as well. So those are just a few of the things we're going to talk about today, and that is what you ought to know. We'll get into a whole lot more as well as we continue with the Schmidt Show next on News Radio 102.9 KARN.